The reason I called in was, I called in before, talked to Matt and Tracy, got hung up on like the most of the theists on here, but
yeah.
Hopefully that won't happen to me so soon.
Well, I'll let Don answer and decide when to hang up. Is that fair?
Fair enough.
Much power.
So really what I want to talk about is I want to set forth an argument that atheism is a lie.
How can something that doesn't make a positive claim be a lie? Sorry, I was going to let Don talk.
Oh, that's fine. Yeah.
Let me explain. The first thing I want to...
You do realize that we define atheism as the lack of belief in gods?
Yes.
Yeah, so I'm not convinced a God exists, just like I'm not convinced fairies exist. Until you can come up with a way that both of those things are lies... I'm sitting here and I honestly don't believe a God exists and I honestly don't believe fairies exist, and yet you're saying I'm lying.
So we presume that we're experts about the state of our minds, right? And
correct.
Yeah. So are you saying I don't understand? I can't fathom my own beliefs and express them?
Let me explain it this way.
Okay.
Let me explain it this way. So first we have to both agree on our definitions. So atheism is the lack of belief in a God or the disbelief of a God. Mm-hmm. And theism is the belief or having faith in God, right?
Basically, if you're convinced a God exists, you're a theist. If not, you're an atheist.
But your definitions are fine.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Faith is something where you're accepting the proposition as true without evidence. Correct?
I'm fine with that definition of faith. I tended to define it as faith is the reason people give for believing something when they don't have a good reason.
Okay, it's more or less kind of the same thing. It's a valid reason, a valid form of evidence.
I would say sound, but okay.
Whereas disbelief is the assumption or the rejection of a claim, or the assumption of the claim being wrong.
No, it's not. Disbelief is not assuming you're wrong. It's not being convinced that you're right. It's essentially the difference between a jury not being convinced of guilt and a jury being convinced of innocence. Those are two different things.
Yet the jury is not convinced with or without evidence. The
default. So atheists are saying God is guilty of existing. Hello?
Nobody can really know if God exists.
Okay, then if nobody can really know if God exists, then this conversation is useless, right? Because you can't know and I can't know. And all I'm saying is I'm not convinced that you're correct, which means of the two of us, I'm the only one that's close to being possibly right. Because you can't demonstrate your case. And all my position is that you can't demonstrate your case, which means not only am I not lying, I'm completely correct. Sorry, Don was going to answer that. Oh, we lost him.
We lost him?
He ran away.
Uh-oh.
Mike, who was on, got disconnected and is back. So there we go. You there, Mike?
Yep, I'm still here. Thanks for having me back on.
Yeah, we didn't hang up on you.
Yeah, I realize it was probably my reception.
Can you maybe in one sentence recap where we were so we can pick up again?
So I want to make the argument that atheism is a lie. Just to run through the definitions again, we went through theism, we went through atheism, we went through belief and disbelief, we went through faith, and we were just about to go through knowing.
I think there's something else we should define.
Yes.
A lie. Because to me,
yes,
if somebody, if I want to say that's a lie, then it needs to be a declarative statement. And in particular, it needs to be not just a declarative statement which is false, but which is knowingly false. There needs to be some intent to deceive.
Okay, it has to be knowingly false. There has to be an intention to be deceptive, pretending, acting, hypocrisy. How would hypocrisy fall into that?
I think there are
category?
ways to intent is difficult because we're talking about what's in somebody's mind. I think there are ways to demonstrate intent through the things that you talked about, like hypocrisy. But what is the declarative statement that you're saying is a lie?
I'm saying that atheism in and of itself as an ideology is a lie.
Okay, atheism, stop. Atheism is not a declarative statement, so it cannot be a lie. So we need to know what the declarative statement is that you think is a lie.
You say atheism is not a declarative statement.
Correct.
Perhaps you're saying that it's more of a label or a term that we've used to categorize people. Is that what you're saying?
No. Even if you went to what is the atheist position, my position as an atheist is that theism has not met its burden of proof, and therefore I am unconvinced. That's it.
So you could go a number of places from here. It's like, okay, well, you're ignoring evidence. Okay. You're willfully ignoring evidence. That might be a way. Or you secretly go in the closet at night and believe in God, and during the day you're presenting another case. Which of those two am I getting close to where you're coming from?
It's a little bit different. So my idea is that if we accept the premise that no one has evidence if God exists or not, and we accept the premise
then you could never conclude that atheism is a lie. Because if you, this is what I was acknowledging when you got disconnected. If your position is that no one can demonstrate with evidence whether or not a God exists, then there's no way for anyone to come down on either side of that, which means you couldn't possibly demonstrate that either of them is a lie.
Except that we have in practice that believers, by the definition of their name, they don't actually assert to know if God exists.
I don't care. I don't care. This isn't about knowledge. It's a question about belief and reasonableness. So theists believe there's a God. I don't care if they claim to know it. Atheists do not believe in a God. They don't claim to know that there is no God.
But still, believers have a faith in God, which is the assumption that there is no evidence to begin with. So they're not asserting knowledge.
Yes, they believe something without good reason. We've established that that's faith.
Whereas, at the other hand, we have atheists who claim they disbelieve God exists, but their disbelief is actually based on the assumption that they understand what valid evidence for God would be.
Yes.
And they assert that there is a lack of this valid evidence, or that there's even contradictory valid evidence to establish their belief or their disbelief, rather.
No. So this gets to the question of when people ask me, what would convince you that God exists? I have a stock answer that I've used for years now, but it's changed because I have no idea. I am not pretending to know what it would take to demonstrate that a God exists. Just that it hasn't happened. I don't need to know what evidence would prove string theory, just that it hasn't happened. I don't need to know what evidence would prove a God exists, but if there is a God, that God absolutely should know what evidence should convince people and has not presented it, and therefore either that God does not exist or that God does not want people to know he exists yet. This is not about, I'm not in any way assuming I know what evidence would prove a God and that evidence hasn't shown up. I'm saying I have no idea what evidence would prove a God, but if it shows up, it will be recognizable as evidence for it, just like I don't know what evidence would prove that fairies are real. But as soon as that evidence is presented in a sufficiently reliable context to which it would warrant belief in fairies, then I'm going to believe in fairies. But I don't know what that evidence would be. And in a God sense, it would be monumentally arrogant for me to assume that I know what that evidence would be. The real problem here is that there are countless people running around saying, hey, we've got evidence for God. And then people like me are saying, oh, really? What is it? And when they present the evidence, it's not.
But this is the problem with that position, even though I agree with you probably 95% of the way.
Well, good.
The problem with that in the end is that we agree that no one has evidence for God. No one can really know if God exists. Everybody in the end has to believe or disbelieve. So in this kind of dichotomy where knowledge isn't really an option, then you're faced with a little bit of a different proposition.
Yes, you either claim that you have good reason to believe something or you exercise faith.
Yes, exactly. And if what you said is true, the latter about God is true. What you said was that God doesn't want everyone to know that he exists.
Okay.
Which, if that's true,
then every believer is by definition unwarranted in their belief, because if God doesn't want people to know he exists, then they cannot possibly have a justified position.
Well, if God doesn't want everyone to know he
Correct.
exists, that's true. But if he wants a select few people to know, not everybody,
Yes.
but just a few,
I completely agree. But if there's a God that's going around selectively revealing himself to people, those people are the only ones that could possibly have evidentiary warrant. They cannot demonstrate it to anybody else. And it doesn't make a shit spit of difference to me, because until I'm presented with that evidence, I am holding the only rational position that I can hold, and it's not a lie.
I understand your position. I do understand that, but...
How am I lying then?
Well, the idea of atheism being a disbelief based on valid evidence or the lack of evidence, assuming that, that there is evidence for God or anybody has evidence, that in itself is a lie.
What? No. You don't get to keep carrying on.
You've been running a television show for 20 years begging people to give us evidence. Please give us some evidence.
So you don't get to just call something a lie. I mean, you can.
Well, let me ask you this. What's better, to be arrogant or be ignorant?
Arrogant.
If you had to choose one.
Arrogant would be better than ignorant.
That's the thing. Like, the theist would choose ignorance.
I'm very well aware of that. Voluntarily choosing it through an exercise of faith and then calling in to say that atheists are lying and having no demonstration that we're lying.
Is it arrogant to say that we don't know?
But also, by the way, arrogance versus ignorance is a false dichotomy, because there's monumentally fuck tons of people who are incredibly ignorant and very arrogant about it. The difference is they have not met their burden of proof. It's not a lie for me to say you have not convinced me. It's not a lie for me to say I've evaluated all of the arguments for the existence of God that have been presented, that I've found and explored, and also found them wanting. It's not a lie for me to say that if, in fact, there was a sound argument supported by evidence for the existence of God, it'd be on the front page of every newspaper. It'd be the only thing people were talking about on TV. It'd be a Nobel Prize. It would have every organization giving that. The fact that that hasn't happened is the demonstration that theism has not met its burden of proof, and under no circumstance is a rejection of a bald assertion rooted in faith with a declaration from you that nobody can have evidence for this. In no way is that ever a lie to say, I don't believe you.
Okay, I guess from your perspective, I do understand your position. You're
I bet money you don't.
Perspective that atheism is a response to the theistic claim, not a response to God's existence itself, but to the theistic claim. So
mankind has invented 20,000 gods. I'm not quite sure which one you're talking about.
Well, I'm a Christian, so I'm talking about the Christian God in general.
Okay. I'm curious,
how is
have you killed any witches?
How is the Christian God, for which we don't have evidence for, distinguishable from a Hindu God that we don't have evidence for?
This is the thing. So just as somebody who has had, I guess, his own little bit of evidence to give me enough faith to believe in God, this is the thing. You cannot get that evidence without starting to believe first.
Yeah, that's called self-deception, and it in no way answers the question that I just asked. To say that you need to believe first in order to get the evidence is exactly the recipe for self-deception. That's a con game. What I asked was, how is the Christian God, for which you think there is no evidence, distinguishable from a Hindu God that you have no evidence for?
That's kind of a loaded question.
You bet.
I can't really answer that, because the Hindu God and the Christian God might be the same. It depends on who that Hindu and that.
No, they're not the same. What kind of fucking Christian could possibly claim that the Christian God and the Hindu God might be the same? What do you know? This is the most bizarre version of Christianity I've ever heard, to say my God might be the same as the Hindu God. Really?
Well, the Christian God is the creator of the universe and everything in it. So therefore, the Christian God is really the God of everyone. It's whether or not that individual person acknowledges that or not. It's not really, is the Hindu God or the Christian God.
There are many Hindu gods. All right, so you're basically saying Ganesh and Jesus could be the same.
And the Holy Ghost and the flying spaghetti monster.
I'm saying I can't speak as far as the Hindu God. All I understand is that there's one God, and that one God, that monotheism kind of.
And how do you know that?
All religions. Well, it's kind of
faith.
The idea that life comes from a singular cause, or that everything. Sorry, not just life, but
I thought you said we couldn't have evidence, and this was a faith thing. Why are you talking about life now?
Well, we can have evidence.
Oh, whoa. You said
confused.
Nobody could have evidence for or against this.
Oh, okay. What I meant was definitive, valid evidence so as to...
Okay, first of all, evidence is...
describe knowledge.
Stop using the word valid. It has a very particular usage in logic, and what you're talking about is evidence, which is what makes a premise sound or not. Valid goes to the structure of the argument. Not that you would know that either.
Technical term.
The validity of the evidence. Not in logical terms.
Sure,
I'm just talking about the validity.
Okay, colloquially, the validity of the evidence. So now you think that there is evidence, good evidence, for a God, when before you said there wasn't. Not
definitive. So there's the difference between belief and knowledge, right? Knowledge.
No, fucking no.
We want this great evidence.
Already set aside the notion of knowledge. It's irrelevant. Belief is either warranted or it is not. And if you think that there is evidence for, when you say not definitive evidence, to me that sounds like you're saying not sufficient evidence to warrant belief.
No, I'm saying not sufficient evidence to warrant knowledge. But belief, you don't have to have, definitive knowledge. It just has to be beyond a reasonable...
Instead of having the conversation, why don't we have the conversation and give us the damn evidence?
There we go. You're going with beyond a reasonable doubt, right?
Beyond a reasonable doubt, yes.
Sure. So let's set up a courtroom where God is accused of existing, and you need to demonstrate that beyond a reasonable doubt.
Go.
First, produce the defendant.
I need to demonstrate that to myself, right?
You need to demonstrate it.
That might be a starting point.
So reasonableness is not just a personal fucking opinion. Reasonableness is demonstrated. Now, everybody's going to have a slightly different standard about how much evidence is required for various things. Extraordinary evidence or extraordinary claims are going to require extraordinary evidence. If Don tells me that he just got a new pet poodle, I'm going to take him at his word for a number of reasons. One, because I know that poodles exist and people have them as pets. I trust Don because he has no reason to lie about it. I understand I live in a world where this sort of thing happens. And if it turns out that Don is lying to me, then I will change my mind. And then I know something new about Don and that he will lie about having a pet. But having a pet poodle is in a completely different category from there is a being that exists inside and outside of space-time, who is the creator of the universe, who came down and took human form in order to sacrifice himself to himself so that we can have salvation from what he was going to do to us if we don't accept this.
And is completely obsessed about your sex life.
Yes. Now, the evidence for that claim would need to be vastly stronger than, hey, somebody told me a story. Hey, somebody wrote something down in a book.
Or, hey, I had a feeling.
Do you have any physical evidence for anybody ever rising from the dead, apart from in a hospital where their heart is stopped and they're resuscitated? Because death is a process. Find somebody that's been dead for a day and a half, and they rise again.
That's kind of the thing. If we have evidence that's demonstrable to everybody else, then that kind of goes against the whole idea that God does not want everyone to know. He just wants a select few to know.
Okay, then God's a dick. I got to go. We are 2 minutes. We are 2 minutes over where I said I was going to end the show.
Talk next time.
Yep.
Sure.